Dawn broke reluctantly over Smallhaven Forest. Mist clung to the underbrush, swirling around ancient oaks that seemed determined to preserve their secrets. Officer Marley Reed stepped carefully over a fallen log, his breath forming small clouds. In the morning chill, 10 months of searching had hollowed his face. Behind him, 3 other officers spread out in practiced formation. "Nothing's going to be different today," muttered Officer Chen. Reed didn't respond. They all knew the statistics on missing children. The burned triplets, Jenna, Maya, and Emma, had become Smallhaven's open wound. A flash of color caught Reed's eye, something unnatural among the browns and greens. Hanging from a low branch, twisting slightly in the breeze, was a single red shoe, small, a child's size. "Over here," he called. The shoe dangled like a forgotten ornament, its sparkles dulled by weather but unmistakably from the carnival, custom-made for the triplets' final performance at the Smallhaven Annual Carnival. Detective Diana Mercer arrived within 20 minutes. She didn't speak as she approached, her eyes fixed on the shoe that Reed had carefully refrained from touching. "Photograph everything," she instructed the crime scene technicians. "Then we search in concentric circles." As the morning progressed, the mist burned away. 10 yards from the shoe, partially buried beneath rotting leaves, a scrap of fabric protruded from the soil. Diana knelt beside it, using a pen to gently brush away the debris. Red sequins caught the light, forming a pattern that matched the carnival posters still clinging to Smallhaven's storefronts. With gloved hands, she carefully extracted what proved to be a single glove. "It's one of theirs," she said simply. The triplets had worn matching red and gold ensembles that transformed 3 12-year-old girls into the amazing Byrne sisters, the highlight of the carnival's final night. By noon, they had found more, scattered pieces of costume emerging from the forest floor like macabre wildflowers. Each item was tagged, photographed, collected with methodical precision. Each represented another nail in the coffin of Smallhaven's hopes. Diana stood at the edge of the clearing, staring at the orphaned glove now sealed in an evidence bag. The forest suddenly seemed too quiet, as though holding its breath. And before we continue, please like and sub and comment where you're watching from. Where were the girls? Why had their costumes appeared now, scattered through the forest? And, most troubling of all, why were there traces of blood, dark and ominous, spattered across the once bright fabric? She turned the evidence bag slowly. Something about the glove's position nagged at her. Not carelessly discarded, but deliberately placed, fingers splayed as though pointing, warning, or perhaps beckoning. 3 months before their disappearance, the Byrne triplets had celebrated their 12th birthday with a cake shaped like interlocking circus rings. Their father, Nathan Byrne, had spent 3 days constructing it, the kitchen of their modest bungalow transformed by fondant and food coloring. The girls had blown out their candles in perfect synchronization, a talent they'd been perfecting, since they were old enough to understand they were 3 parts of a remarkable whole. Nathan had watched them with the complicated love of a single parent. Since their mother's death 5 years earlier, he had been their entire world, just as they had been his. 3 identical faces with subtle differences only he could consistently identify. Jenna, with her serious eyes that missed nothing. Maya, with the small scar on her chin from falling off the porch swing. Emma, with freckles that intensified in summer. Smallhaven knew them collectively as the Byrne girls, but Nathan had always insisted on their individuality. "They're not a matching set," he'd snap when neighbors couldn't tell them apart. "They're 3 different people who happen to look alike." Jenna, born first, had inherited her mother's methodical nature. Her room was immaculate, journal entries dated and cataloged. She'd organized their carnival act, creating practice schedules with the seriousness of a professional stage manager. Maya, the middle triplet, moved through the world with casual confidence. Where Jenna planned, Maya improvised. Her corner of their shared bedroom was a creative explosion. Half-finished sketches, collections of stones, a terrarium housing Edgar, her beloved tree frog. Emma, the youngest, lived perpetually in her head. Quieter than her sisters, she startled people with sudden, insightful observations after long silences. Her side of the room featured a telescope and walls covered with maps, some of real places, others of fantasy worlds she'd created. Their differences had become more pronounced in the months before the carnival. Nathan had noticed the shifting dynamics. 12 was a difficult age, too old for childish things, but too young for independence. The carnival had been Jenna's idea, a chance to showcase the juggling skills they'd been developing since age 8. Under their mother's tutelage, they'd started with scarves, progressed to balls, then clubs. After her death, they'd continued practicing, transforming grief into disciplined focus. "We could be part of the show, Dad," Jenna had insisted, spreadsheet of practice hours in hand. "Mr. Austin said we're better than most adults he's seen." Leonard Austin, the carnival's aging director, had offered them a spot in the community showcase that traditionally closed the week-long event. Nathan had agreed reluctantly, uncomfortable with the carnival folk who seemed to speak a language he couldn't quite grasp. The triplets, however, blossomed under the attention. For 3 weeks, they practiced religiously in the backyard, perfecting timing that depended on their almost supernatural awareness of each other's movements. "It's because we share a brain," Maya had joked, spinning a club with casual precision. "It's because we've been practicing for 4 years," corrected Jenna. "It's because we're magic," whispered Emma, her eyes fixed on some distant point beyond the fence. The night they disappeared had been unseasonably warm for October. The carnival's final evening drew the largest crowd in Smallhaven's history. The air smelled of caramel apples and sawdust. Colored lights transformed the town square into a fantastical landscape where ordinary rules seemed temporarily suspended. Nathan had helped the girls into their costumes, red and gold creations that their mother had designed before cancer took her. Their performance went perfectly, clubs flying between them in increasingly complex patterns, flames tracing golden arcs against the night sky. Afterward, they'd begged for 1 hour to explore the carnival on their own. Nathan had waited by the Ferris wheel, watching his watch with growing anxiety as their hour stretched to 70 minutes, then 90. By the 2-hour mark, he was searching frantically, pushing through crowds that seemed suddenly malevolent. By midnight, the police had been called. By dawn, the carnival grounds stood empty, the traveling show packed up with suspicious efficiency. 10 months of investigation had yielded nothing. The carnival company, Nightfall Entertainments, had cooperated, minimally providing employee records that proved largely fictitious. Leonard Austin had disappeared along with his traveling show, his name turning up in no databases. Nathan had stayed in Smallhaven for 6 months, haunting the police station, organizing search parties. When the last search dog had failed to find a scent, when the FBI had suggested redirecting resources to more promising cases, Nathan had left. He'd driven west without a destination, as though physical distance might somehow dull the pain. 4 months later, Diana Mercer stood in the forest clearing, holding a glove that had belonged to one of the Byrne triplets. In her other hand, her phone displayed Nathan's contact information. She hesitated, knowing what the call would do to him, knowing also that she had no choice. The third item they recovered that day changed everything. Beneath a thick carpet of pine needles lay Jenna's journal, its red cover weathered but intact, its pages filled with her precise handwriting. The final entry, dated the day of disappearance, contained a single line. "Something's wrong with the carnival people. They watch us when they think we're not looking. Emma says they're not people at all." The call came in at 5:47 a.m. through the police department's non-emergency line. The dispatcher had almost missed it, a whispered message that lasted less than 15 seconds. Children's costumes in Holloway Clearing, red and gold. Blood. Diana Mercer replayed the recording for the 5th time, the voice distorted by poor connection and what sounded like deliberate disguising. Rain drummed against the station's roof as she poured another cup of bitter coffee. "Anything?" Chief Monroe asked, leaning against her doorframe. At 58, with retirement papers already filed, the burn case had carved new lines into his face. "Nothing definitive. Voice analysis can't determine age or gender. Call came from a burner phone." She rubbed her eyes. "But they knew details. We never released to the public. The red and gold costume colors were never mentioned in the press. Meaning, either our caller is involved, or they've seen something they shouldn't have," Diana finished. "Either way, it led us to the first physical evidence in 10 months. The evidence lay on her desk. 3 partial costumes, torn and weathered. A single shoe with the burn name written inside. Jenna's journal with its disturbing final entry, and, most troublingly, a silver bracelet with a crescent moon charm, an item that had never belonged to any of the triplets. Diana had verified this personally, spending hours in the burn home that afternoon. The house stood empty but preserved, furniture draped with sheets like patient ghosts. In the girl's bedroom, she'd found 3 jewelry boxes, each labeled with a triplet's name. None contained anything resembling the silver bracelet. "We need to call him," Monroe said, not needing to specify who. Diana nodded, though the prospect filled her with dread. Nathan Byrne had become a friend during those desperate months of searching. She had watched him disintegrate in slow motion, sleepless nights etching themselves into the shadows beneath his eyes. When he'd finally left town, she'd felt both relief and abandonment. His absence had allowed Smallhaven to begin healing, to speak of something besides missing children. "I'll call him," she said, reaching for her phone. The number rang 4 times before connecting. In the background, Diana heard traffic noise, the indistinct chatter of a busy restaurant. "Diana?" Nathan's voice was instantly alert, absence of surprise confirming what she'd long suspected, that he carried his phone everywhere, that every call triggered momentary hope. "We found something," she said simply. "In the forest. Pieces of the costumes." The silence lasted so long she thought they'd been disconnected. Then, a single indrawn breath, shaky and raw. "Are they?" He couldn't finish the question. "No bodies," Diana answered quickly. "Just costume pieces, scattered across a clearing. And Jenna's journal." "I'm leaving now. 10 hours, maybe less." "Nathan," she hesitated, "the costumes have blood on them. Not much, but enough that we've sent samples for testing. Just tell me one thing," he finally said, his voice stripped to its core. "Are they still alive? Not what the statistics say. What does Diana Mercer, with all her experience, believe?" Diana closed her eyes. The professional answer was clear. After. This long, with blood evidence, the probability of survival was virtually non-existent. But she thought of Jenna's journal entry. "They're not people at all." She thought of 3 partial costumes when there should have been 3 complete ones. "I think there are too many unanswered questions to give up hope," she said carefully. "I think someone wants us to keep looking." 9 hours later, Nathan Byrne walked into the Smallhaven police station, rain-soaked and hollow-eyed. He looked simultaneously older and younger than Diana remembered, aged by grief, yet somehow distilled to a more essential version of himself. The casual clothes and scholarly glasses were gone, replaced by utilitarian hiking boots, weatherproof jacket, and a hardness around his mouth. The costumes lay on a steel table under bright fluorescent lights, their cheerful colors jarring against the institutional gray walls. Nathan approached slowly, hands hovering inches above the fabric without touching. "These are theirs," he confirmed. "The sequin pattern on the bodice. Caroline designed it to look like a sunrise." His voice caught. "She said it was because the girls were the dawn of something new." "The blood," he said finally. "How much? Whose?" "Preliminary tests confirm it's human. Not enough to indicate fatal injury, but more than a simple cut would produce." We're running DNA comparisons now. Nathan nodded mechanically, his attention shifting to Jenna's journal, sealed in a clear evidence bag. He read the final entry silently, his expression unchanging even as color drained from his face. "Emma," he whispered, "always seeing things the rest of us missed." "Did the girls ever mention feeling uncomfortable around the carnival workers?" Nathan's laugh held no humor. "I felt uncomfortable around them. Something off about the whole operation. But the girls—" He shook his head. "They loved it there. Jenna took notes, Maya collected posters, Emma—" He paused. "Emma was quieter about it, but she was always watching." Diana retrieved the final piece of evidence. This was found with the costumes, but as far as we can tell, it didn't belong to any of the girls. The silver bracelet gleamed under the harsh lighting, its crescent moon charm oddly untarnished despite months of exposure. Nathan stared at it, brow furrowed. "I've never seen this before. Could it have belonged to a friend they might have been with that night?" He shook his head. "They weren't with anyone else. They were supposed to meet me at the Ferris wheel after exploring the carnival. They never showed up." His voice hardened. "Someone put this with their things, someone who took them." Diana watched the shift in his demeanor, the way grief receded, replaced by something sharper, more focused. The moment when devastation crystallized into purpose. "I need to see where you found them," Nathan said, no question in his tone. "First light tomorrow," she compromised. "The forest is treacherous in this weather, especially near Holloway Clearing. There's an old limestone quarry. Nearby, sinkholes, unstable ground." As they stepped into the rain, Nathan looked back at the evidence room door, his expression hardening into resolve. "I left because staying was killing me," he said simply. "Every corner of this town holds their voices. I couldn't breathe here." Diana nodded, understanding more than she could express. "And now," the rain plastered Nathan's hair to his forehead, running down his face like tears he refused to shed. "Now I'm back to find them, or to make whoever took them pay." He stared at the costume fragments. "Those clothes don't match what they were wearing when they disappeared." Diana's head snapped up. "What?" "The torn pieces. They're from the costumes, yes, but they're wrong. The sequin pattern is slightly different. The stitching on the cuffs is machine-done, not hand-sewn like Caroline's originals." "You're saying these aren't their actual costumes? Just replicas?" Nathan met her eyes, his own, suddenly alive with terrible possibility. "I'm saying someone kept my daughters long enough to create new costumes that match the originals, long enough to need new ones." As if in answer, Diana's phone rang, the lab with preliminary DNA results. The name on the screen seemed to pulse in the dim light. "Detective Mercer," she answered, her voice professionally neutral despite the drumming of her heart. The lab technician's voice crackled through the speaker, half obscured by static. But the message came through with unmistakable clarity. "The blood on the costumes? It's not from the burned triplets. It doesn't match any of their DNA profiles." Nathan's head jerked up, hope and confusion warring across his face. "Then, whose blood is it?" Diana demanded. The technician's response sent ice through her veins. "That's just it, Detective. The DNA doesn't match anyone in the system. But it's unusual. The lab wants to run more tests, but preliminarily, they're saying the genetic markers don't align with standard human profiles." As Diana ended the call, Nathan stared at her, his expression unreadable. "What did Emma write?" he asked quietly. "They're not people at all." Dawn broke reluctantly over Smallhaven Forest. Diana Mercer waited in her SUV, thermos of coffee on the dashboard, watching the forest line blur through intermittent rain. Nathan Byrne sat beside her, silent since they'd left her apartment. "The rain's letting up," she said. "We should be able to reach the clearing without getting soaked." Nathan nodded. What did your lab mean about non-standard human profiles? Initial tests showed anomalies in the genetic markers. The technician was being cautious about conclusions. A battered, green Jeep appeared, pulling up behind them. From it emerged a tall figure with weathered skin and a ranger's uniform. "That's Grayson Wade," Diana said. "Forest Service. Knows this section of the woods better than anyone." Wade approached with the easy gait of someone accustomed to uneven, hew terrain. "Detective," he nodded. "Storm's coming back around by noon. Want to be out by then." Diana made introductions. "Did you ever see anything unusual around the time the girls disappeared?" Nathan asked. Wade shook his head. "Nothing out of the ordinary. But," he paused, "there's parts of these woods that don't make sense sometimes. Paths that seem to change. Animal tracks that disappear mid-stride." He shrugged. "I've learned there are places better left alone after dark. We found the costume pieces in Holloway Clearing. What can you tell us about that area?" "Old limestone. Quarry nearby. The clearing itself is odd. Perfect circle, like someone took a cookie cutter to the forest. Nothing grows in the center, not even weeds." Nathan's attention sharpened. "Nothing grows there. Why?" "Soil composition, maybe. There's an old story about the place being cursed, but that's just folklore." Wade checked his watch. "We should move. Out." They followed Wade's Jeep to a rutted fire trail, then continued on foot. The forest closed around them as they walked single file. They'd gone perhaps a mile when Wade stopped abruptly, holding up one hand in warning. "What is it?" Diana whispered. Wade knelt, examining something on the ground. "Footprints," he said. "Fresh. Someone's been through here since the rain stopped." Diana joined him, peering at a clear boot print. "Standard hiking boot, men's size 10 or 11. Wade assessed. "But, look, custom sole. Never seen this pattern before?" They continued forward. As they approached the clearing, Diana noticed something strange. The footprints they'd been following now doubled back, creating a circle around the perimeter. They emerged from the tree line into Holloway Clearing, a perfect circle of bare earth approximately 30 yards in diameter, surrounded by dense forest. Not a single plant grew in the exposed soil. Nathan stood at the clearing's edge. "Where was Jenna's journal found?" he asked. Diana pointed to a spot near the center. "Under a layer of pine needles, as though someone had deliberately covered it." Wade suddenly crouched down, examining the ground. "Detective," he called, "you need to see this." At the far edge of the clearing, fresh footprints led away. From the circle, small footprints the size a child might make. They weren't the same as the hiking boots they'd followed in. "Those look like," Nathan began, his voice catching. "Performance shoes," Diana finished. "Like dancers wear, or acrobats." The footprints led toward a steep ravine. They looked impossibly fresh. "There's no way these were here yesterday," Diana said. "We had the entire clearing searched." Nathan had already moved to follow the trail. Diana caught his arm. "Wait, we need to document this properly." "By then, they'll be gone," Nathan countered. "Someone is leaving us breadcrumbs." Wade moved ahead, following the footprints to the ravine's edge. "There's something else, a path leading down. It wasn't here last time I patrolled this section, did you?" Steps had been cut into the earth, forming a narrow path that wound down into the shadows. The child-sized footprints continued directly down these steps. "I need to follow them," Nathan said. Diana made her decision. "We go down together," she said firmly. "Ranger Wade stays here to coordinate the incoming team." They descended the crude stairway single file. The ravine walls rose on either side, gradually cutting off daylight. They had descended perhaps 100 feet when the stairway ended at a narrow ledge. Around a bend, the ravine widened into a broader space. At its center stood an ancient oak, impossibly large given its precarious position. Its massive trunk was split near the base, creating an opening large enough for a person to enter. Leading directly to that opening were the footprints they'd been following. "Is that possible?" Nathan whispered. "How could something that size grow down here?" Diana raised her flashlight, illuminating the crevice in the trunk. "Hello," she called. "Anyone?" "There." Nathan moved forward. "There's something inside," he said. "I can see it reflecting." Inside the hollow trunk hung a perfect circle of small objects suspended from the inner wood by thin red threads. A key ring, a marble, a hair clip, a small mirror, a thimble, a button, a coin. In the center, hanging slightly lower than the rest, was a silver locket. Nathan reached for it with trembling fingers. "This is Emma's," he whispered. "Caroline gave it to her on their 10th birthday." The locket gleamed dully, its front face inscribed, "Always together." "Open it," Diana said softly. Nathan carefully worked the small clasp. The locket sprang open to reveal a small folded piece of paper. With painstaking care, Nathan extracted and unfolded it. Written in a childish hand were 3 words. "We're still here." The storm broke as Diana and Nathan emerged from the ravine. At the station, Chief Monroe was waiting as Diana briefed him on their discovery. "Handwriting analysis?" he asked, examining the note preserved between glass plates. "Already sent digital images to the lab," Diana confirmed. "But it looks like Emma's writing." Monroe rubbed his jaw. "And this tree, you're saying it shouldn't exist where you found it?" According to Ranger Wade, nothing that size could grow on unstable quarry fill. Before Monroe could respond, the lab technician, Vihan Patel, knocked on the office door. "Preliminary results on the locket," he announced. "No usable fingerprints, but the metal composition is interesting. It's primarily silver, but with trace elements not typically found in commercial jewelry." "What kind of trace elements?" Diana asked. "Unusual metallic compounds. There are similarities to the anomalies we found in the blood samples from the costumes." "Meaning?" Nathan asked. "Both the blood and the metal contain molecular structures that don't align with standard references. The alteration isn't random mutation or contamination. It's purposeful, engineered." Monroe's desk phone rang, interrupting the tense silence. "Diana, there's a Carnival worker downstairs asking for you. Says she has information about the burn case." "Name?" "Eliza Marsh. Claims she worked for Nightfall Entertainments when the Triplets disappeared." 5 minutes later, a woman in her late 20s was escorted into Monroe's office. Eliza Marsh had the weathered look of someone who'd spent years outdoors. Diana noted the distinctive tattoo peeking from beneath her sleeve. A crescent moon, surrounded by stars. "Ms. Marsh," Diana began, "you have information about the burned triplets?" Eliza's eyes darted to Nathan. "You're their father," she said softly. "I remember you." "You worked at the Carnival?" Nathan asked. "Cotton candy stand, officially, but I did other jobs. Helped with costumes sometimes. Helped Leonard with special projects." "Leonard Austin, the Carnival director?" Eliza nodded. "That's why I'm here. I saw the news about finding costume pieces in the forest. I recognized them from the description. I helped make those duplicates." The room went still. "Explain," Diana said firmly. "Leonard had me make copies of the triplets' costumes about a week after they joined the show. Said it was standard practice. Backup costumes in case something happened to the originals." Eliza swallowed hard. "I thought it was strange they needed 3 identical copies, but Leonard, you didn't question his requests." "Where are the original costumes?" Nathan asked. "I don't know. After the girls disappeared, Leonard ordered everything connected to them destroyed. But I kept the duplicate costumes hidden in my trailer." "And how did these duplicates end up scattered in Holloway Clearing?" Diana asked. "That's the part I don't understand. I left the Carnival 6 months ago, after Leonard—" She paused. "After things got too strange. The duplicate costumes were still hidden in my trailer when I left." "What do you mean? Too strange?" "The carnival changed after that last night in Smallhaven. Leonard became obsessed with something he called the transition. Kept talking about worthy vessels and the crossing point." Eliza's voice dropped. "People started disappearing. Carnival workers who asked too many questions, and others joined who weren't." "Right." "Weren't right how?" Nathan leaned forward. "They looked normal enough, but they didn't act like people. Didn't eat with the rest of us. Didn't sleep that I could tell, and they all had this mark somewhere on their bodies." "A crescent moon? Like your tattoo?" Diana asked. Eliza shook her head. "Mine's just a tattoo. Theirs was different, like a brand, but with this luminescent quality, especially at night." She drew a pattern in the air, a crescent moon with a star positioned inside its curve. "The carnival poster," Nathan said hoarsely. "That exact symbol was on the promotional materials." "Do you have any direct knowledge of what happened to the burned triplets?" Diana asked. Eliza hesitated. "Not exactly, but there were rumors about special children who joined the carnival over the years. Children who showed aptitudes." "What kind of aptitudes?" "Unusual talents, synchronized movements, prescience, the ability to know things they shouldn't know." Eliza looked at Nathan. "Your daughter's juggling act, the way they moved in perfect harmony without looking at each other." Leonard noticed immediately. "You're saying he targeted them specifically?" "Leonard believed some children are born with one foot in another world," Eliza said carefully. "He called them threshold children. Said they could open doors most people don't even see." After Eliza left, Nathan pulled out his phone, opening a video file. "I took this about 3 months before they disappeared." The video showed the triplets passing clubs between them in increasingly complex patterns. What made the footage remarkable wasn't just the skill of their juggling, but the eerie similarity of their movements. 3 bodies moving as though controlled by a single mind. "Caroline called it triplet telepathy," Nathan continued. "But it was more than that. Watch this part." The video continued to a moment when Maya dropped a club, breaking the pattern. All 3 girls simultaneously raised their right hands to their foreheads as though experiencing the same sudden pain. Then, without a word exchanged, they resumed their positions. "We took them to specialists when they were younger," Nathan explained. "Doctors found unusual brainwave synchronization when they were in proximity to each other. One neurologist mentioned something called quantum entanglement at the neural level." "Did the girls ever mention strange experiences?" Diana asked. "Shared dreams, visions, unusual perceptions?" Emma was always the most attuned. She talked about seeing people's colors, auras maybe, and she had night terrors about the hollow people who looked normal but weren't people inside. His voice caught. "We thought it was just an active imagination." By nightfall, Diana sat in her SUV at the Forest Access Road reviewing lab reports. The latest analysis confirmed what earlier tests had suggested. The DNA contained protein sequences not recorded in any human genetic database. Her phone vibrated with an incoming text from Officer Chen, positioned near Holloway Clearing. Movement on the North Ridge. Single figure moving fast. Diana started the engine. "Hold position. Do not engage. Back up en route." She was still 5 minutes from the clearing when Officer Chen called. "What's happening?" Diana answered. "You need to get here now," Chen replied, her voice tight with tension. "The figure we spotted. It's a child. A girl in a red costume." Diana's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Just one." "That we can see. She's standing in the center of the clearing, completely still." Diana parked at the forest access point and started up the trail. As she approached Officer Chen's position, the young officer materialized from behind a massive oak, finger to her lips in warning. She pointed toward the clearing. Diana crouched, using binoculars. to study the scene. In the center stood a small figure in a red costume that glittered in the moonlight. A girl of perhaps 12, her back to their position, face turned upward toward the sky. The girl suddenly turned, facing directly toward their hidden position despite the considerable distance and darkness. Then, with deliberate slowness, the child raised one hand and beckoned. "She's calling us forward," Chen whispered. "How could she possibly know we're here?" Diana was already moving toward the clearing's edge with her weapon drawn but pointed downward. As they emerged from the tree line, the girl remained motionless, arm extended in that beckoning gesture. Now Diana could see her face, delicate features, hair pulled back in a tight bun. With absolute certainty, Diana recognized Emma Byrne. Except the girl couldn't possibly be Emma. 10 months had passed since the triplets' disappearance. This child appeared exactly as Emma had on the night she vanished. Same height, same build, not a day older. "Emma?" Diana called softly. "Emma Byrne." The girl lowered her arm slowly. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly across the clearing, despite its softness. "Not exactly," she said, "but close enough for now." Diana took another cautious step forward. "Where are the Byrne triplets? Are they alive?" "Definitions matter, Detective Mercer. Alive means different things in different contexts. Who are you?" "A messenger. A guide." The girl smiled. "A crossing. Point." Chen had moved to Diana's right. "Diana," she said quietly, "her feet. Look at her feet." Diana glanced down. The girl's feet didn't quite touch the ground. She hovered an inch above the earth, the hem of her costume floating as though suspended in water. "What do you want?" Diana asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. "To show you. That's why I led you to the locket. To the tree." The girl's form seemed to shimmer slightly. The triplets were perfect candidates. 3 aspects of one consciousness, already half in and half out of your reality. Where are they now? Are they safe? "They're becoming," the girl said simply. "The transition takes time. Their father understands, or he's beginning to. Deep down, he always knew his daughters were different." "What are you saying? That they're not human?" The girl laughed, a tinkling sound like small bells. "Oh, they're very human. And also something more." Leonard Austin understood this. He spent decades seeking threshold children, those born with the capacity to exist in multiple realities simultaneously. "The Carnival," Diana said slowly. "It wasn't just entertainment. It was a recruitment operation." "A testing ground," the girl corrected. "Most children show no aptitude, but the Byrne triplets, their connection was extraordinary." "Potential for what?" Diana demanded. "To bridge the gap, to open the way." The girl's form flickered now. "My. Time grows short. The forest clearing is a thin place, a point where realities touch. If you wish to understand, come alone tomorrow night. Midnight. Bring the father." With that, the girl began to fade, her form growing increasingly transparent. Diana lunged forward instinctively, but her hands passed through empty air where the child had stood. "Please tell me you saw that too," Chen whispered. Diana nodded slowly. "We need to find Nathan. Now." They drove directly to his house, finding the front door unlocked and the interior lights on. Nathan sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers and photographs. He looked up as Diana entered. "You saw her," he said. "Not a question." Diana nodded. "How did you know?" "Because I've been finding these." He gestured to the papers before him, drawings done in childish hands. Emma's artwork, Diana realized. Page after page of sketches showing 3 identical girls holding hands with strange, elongated figures. Behind them, a carnival tent with a crescent moon and star symbol. And everywhere, in the margins, the same phrase written in Emma's distinctive handwriting. "They're waiting for us." She knew, Nathan said softly. Emma always knew they were different. that they were being called somewhere. He picked up a journal with Emma's name carefully printed on the cover. Listen to this entry from 3 months before they disappeared. The Carnival man watches us practice. He sees what others don't, that we're not just sisters, we're parts of something bigger. When we juggle together, I can feel the spaces between worlds thin out. Maya and Jenna feel it too, but they don't understand it like I do. There are others waiting for us. The Carnival is just their way in. The girl in. The clearing said to come back tomorrow at midnight, Diana said. She said to bring you. Nathan nodded. I'll be there. Nathan, we don't know what we're dealing with. Something that explains why my daughters could communicate without speaking, why Emma could predict events before they happened, why they moved, in perfect synchronization, even when blindfolded. He closed Emma's journal carefully. I've spent 10 months running from the possibility that my daughters weren't just taken. They were chosen. Diana thought about the evidence they'd gathered. Blood, with non-human genetic markers, the impossibly located tree, the girl who hovered above the ground. Let's say I believe this, she said carefully, that the Carnival identified children with special abilities, that your daughters were targeted because of their unusual connection. That doesn't explain what happened to them or where they are now. No, Nathan agreed, but it explains why we found no conventional evidence, why the Carnival and its people seemed to vanish so completely. Inside a dusty shoebox were medical reports from specialists the triplets had visited as young children. One document stood out, an MRI analysis showing almost identical brain activity patterns across all 3 girls despite being tested in separate rooms. The neurologist's notes included a comment that had been underlined: quantum neural entanglement, unprecedented synchronized activity despite physical separation. Diana remembered the girl in the clearing. 3 aspects of one consciousness, already half in and half out of your reality. What if they're not really separate people? Nathan asked. What if they're facets of a single entity, somehow distributed across 3 bodies? They approached Holloway Clearing at 11:45 p.m. The forest unnaturally silent around them. The clearing looked different at night, the perfect circle more pronounced, the bare earth seeming to glow faintly. 5 minutes, Diana said, checking her watch. She'd positioned Officer Chen and 2 others at distant observation points, with strict instructions to maintain absolute silence unless emergency extraction was needed. Nathan nodded, his face oddly peaceful. This place has always been here, you know. The old maps of Smallhaven mark it as the Crossing. Local legend says it's a place where lost travelers sometimes find their way home. Diana was about to respond when the air in the center of the clearing began to shimmer like heat rising from summer pavement. The shimmering intensified, coalescing into 3 distinct points of light that gradually expanded and took form. 3 figures stood where emptiness had been moments before. 3 girls in red and gold costumes, their features identical and hauntingly familiar. The Byrne triplets, looking exactly as they had the night they disappeared, their faces serene and unblemished by the passage of time. Dad, they said in perfect unison, their voices overlapping into a single harmonic tone. You came. Nathan stepped forward, all caution abandoned. Jenna? Maya? Emma? His voice broke on each name. The triplets smiled, the same smile, the same tilt of head. Yes and no, they answered as one. We are them, but we are more now. The transition is nearly complete. Diana moved to Nathan's side. Are you really the Byrne triplets? Or are you something else, using their appearance? The girls turned toward her, their movements perfectly synchronized. An understandable question, Detective Mercer. We are the consciousness that existed within Jenna, Maya, and Emma Byrne, but we have evolved, expanded. They gestured to their surroundings. This place has always been a threshold between realities. Leonard Austin discovered its purpose centuries ago. Centuries, Diana repeated. That's not possible. Time flows differently between worlds, the triplets explained, still speaking in that uncanny unison. Leonard has crossed back and forth for what you would measure as 400 years, seeking children with the capacity to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Nathan took another step forward. Are my daughters still alive? The triplets' expression softened. We exist, Father, but not as you remember us. The three bodies were vessels for a single consciousness, our consciousness. We always knew we were different, that we belonged somewhere else. You chose to go with him. Nathan's voice broke. With Leonard? We chose to become what we truly are, they answered. The Carnival was merely a vehicle. Leonard recognized our potential, saw that we were already operating as a single entity distributed across three bodies. He helped us complete the transition. Diana struggled to process what she was hearing. The costumes in the forest, the locket, the note. Why leave those for us to find? Because the transition isn't complete, they said. For full transcendence, we need closure in this reality. We need you to understand, to accept. They extended their hands toward Nathan. And we need a guide. Nathan stumbled back a step. A guide? The threshold requires balance. 3 came through. 1 must go back, temporarily, to maintain equilibrium. They smiled again, that synchronized expression that was both familiar and alien. You share our blood, our quantum resonance pattern. You can cross between worlds, Father. You want me to go with you? Nathan whispered. To see where we are, to understand that we're safe, happy, fulfilled in ways this reality could never allow. Their voices took on an almost hypnotic quality. Then you can return and live your life knowing the truth. Or stay, if you choose. There's a place for you there, too. Diana seized Nathan's arm. This is insane. We don't know what they are or what they're offering. The triplets turned their gaze toward her, their eyes suddenly luminous in the darkness. We can prove we are who we claim to be, they said. We can tell you something only Jenna, Maya, and Emma would know. Diana hesitated. Go ahead. The night before we disappeared, you visited our house, they said. Dad was asleep. You showed us photographs of another missing child, a boy named Tyler Carson, who disappeared 3 years earlier. You asked if we'd seen him at the carnival. They smiled at Diana's shocked expression. We lied. We said no. But we had seen him, backstage with Leonard. He was changing. That's when we knew it would be our turn soon. Diana felt a chill run through her. She had indeed visited the Byrne home that night, had indeed shown the triplets a photograph while Nathan dozed on the couch. She had told no one about this unofficial inquiry, not even Monroe. How do we know this isn't some kind of elaborate mind reading? She demanded, her professional skepticism fighting a losing battle. You don't, they admitted. But ask yourself this, detective. Which is more likely, that an elaborate conspiracy exists to lure our father into the woods? Or that some children simply exist outside the boundaries of conventional reality? Diana looked at Nathan, whose face reflected the same conflict she felt. Desperate hope warring with rational doubt. If I go with you, he said slowly, I'll see where my daughters are? What they've become? Yes, they answered. You'll understand everything. And I can come back? If you choose to, they said. The threshold works both ways for those with the capacity to cross, like father, like daughters. Nathan turned to Diana, his decision already visible in his eyes. I have to know, he said simply. 10 months of conventional investigation got us nowhere. If there's even a chance... Nathan, please, Diana began, but she could see the argument was already lost. How could she counter the pull of a father toward his children, especially when those children stood before him, calling him forward? "You'll need this," the triplets said, extending a hand toward Nathan. In their palm lay a small silver object, a pendant matching the bracelet found with the costumes bearing the crescent moon and star symbol. "The key to crossing," they explained. "Focus your mind on us, on the connection between us. The threshold will open." Nathan took the pendant, his fingers closing around it tightly. "How long," he asked Diana, "before you consider me missing too?" 24 hours, she said firmly. "If you're not back by then, I'm bringing in every resource we have. I don't care what dimension I have to tear apart." The triplets smiled at this, a knowing expression beyond their apparent years. "She won't need to," they assured Nathan. "Time flows differently there, but we can control the return point. To this reality, it will seem like minutes." Nathan nodded, then stepped toward the center of the clearing where his daughters, or the entities wearing their forms, waited with outstretched hands. "Wait," Diana called, a final desperate attempt. What if this is exactly what happened to the triplets? What if they never chose to go? What if they were lured, just like you're being lured now? Nathan paused, looking back at her with eyes that reflected both terror and determination. "Then I'll still be with my daughters," he said, simply. "Either way, I'll have answers." He turned back to the waiting figures, the pendant clutched in his hand beginning to glow with an inner light that matched the eerie luminescence now spreading across the clearing's bare earth. The triplets extended their hands once more, and Nathan reached toward them. The moment their fingers touched, a blinding flash of light erupted from the center of the clearing. Diana threw her arm across her eyes, momentarily blinded. When she could see again, the clearing was empty. Nathan and the triplets were gone. Silence fell across the forest, profound and unnatural. Diana stood frozen at the edge of the clearing, radio crackling with concerned queries from Officer Chen that she couldn't bring herself to answer. What could she possibly say? That a grieving father had just voluntarily disappeared with 3 entities that claimed to be his daughters, but spoke with a single voice and hovered above the ground. Minutes stretched as Diana remained rooted to the spot, unwilling to leave in case Nathan returned. Her mind raced through possible reports, possible explanations, possible search parameters, all woefully inadequate to address what she had witnessed. She was still standing there, lost in thought, when the air in the center of the clearing began to shimmer once more. Diana's hand went to her weapon instinctively, though she knew it would be useless against whatever was manifesting. A single figure took shape. Nathan, standing alone where moments before there had been nothing but empty air. He looked physically unchanged, but something in his expression, in the way he held himself, had fundamentally shifted. "Nathan," Diana called cautiously, not moving from her position. He turned toward her voice, his face illuminated by the moonlight. Tears streaked his cheeks, but his expression was one of profound peace. "I saw them," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "I saw everything." 3 days after Nathan's inexplicable journey through the threshold, Diana sat alone in her office, staring at the incomplete report on her computer screen. How could she possibly document what had happened in Holloway Clearing? What words could capture the sight of 3 children speaking in unison, hovering above the ground, or a man disappearing in a flash of light only to return minutes later, transformed not physically but spiritually? In the end, she wrote simply, "Investigation ongoing. New evidence suggests the possibility of voluntary departure." Nathan had told her little about what he'd witnessed on the other side, claiming some. Experiences defied language, existed beyond the framework of human understanding. But he had emerged with absolute certainty about his daughter's welfare. "They're not gone," he had insisted. "They've become something more, something they were always meant to be." On her desk lay the small silver pendant with its crescent moon and star, the key to crossing. The Triplets had called it. Nathan had returned it to her before leaving town. "Keep it safe," he'd said. "Others will come looking for it. Others like Leonard." Diana picked up the pendant, its metal cool against, her skin yet somehow alive with potential energy. Laboratory analysis had proven fruitless. Its composition defied conventional categorization, much like the blood found on the costumes. Her phone rang, startling her from contemplation. Chief Monroe's voice came through, tense with urgency. "Diana, there's something on the news you need to see." She switched to the small television mounted in the corner of her office, turning to the local news channel. The reporter stood in a familiar setting, the county fairgrounds, 20 miles from Smallhaven, marking the arrival of the Nightfall Carnival, returning to the area for the first time since its controversial departure 10 months ago. Representatives declined to comment on the disappearance of 3 local children during their previous engagement, stating only that they're here to bring joy and wonder to a new generation. The camera panned across colorful tents being erected, carnival workers moving with practiced efficiency. And there, directing operations from the center of the grounds, stood a tall figure in a long coat, his face partially obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. Diana leaned forward, pulse quickening. Though she had never met Leonard Austin, she knew instinctively this was him, the carnival director, the seeker of threshold children, the man who had facilitated the Triplets' transformation. He turned suddenly toward the camera, as though sensing her attention across the miles, and smiled. In his hand, he held what appeared to be a flyer for the carnival's opening night performance. Emblazoned across the top in flowing script were the words, "Nightfall presents The Crossing," and below, in smaller text, "Special auditions for gifted children. Twins and triplets especially welcome." Diana's fingers closed around the silver pendant as a chill ran through her. The carnival had returned, and the hunt for threshold children had begun anew.